we've talked about feedback a little bit here, but in your book, you say that not taking feedback is not an option. And we talked a little bit about the NPS score and how you guys are constantly gathering that feedback. What are some of those tricks and what are some of the best ways you found to gather that feedback regardless of what kind of business you are?
I think feedback is one of those things that I learned to really embrace, but it started externally and then I really turned it internally, and our team is now phenomenal at it, but it took time and years of failing at getting good feedback and just being like, no, we're doing it right. It's fine. Just keep running. And next thing you know, people are exhausted and they're not doing things right, but you're not talking about it. So it's just, there's failure that's happening you don't realize. And so I think feedback is about having honest, candid conversations and making that normal, making that a part of the journey. And when you can listen to the other person, but really listen, not just sit there and nod your head, but actually put yourself in that person's shoes and say, okay, I'm going to just take off my defensive hat right now and actually listen to the person in front of me and see what they have to say. It was a big skill that took a lot of years for me to sort of have, but it helped so much because then you're actually hearing what the situation is on the other end and you can fix it, just like with a customer, but internally. And your internal team is your everything, right? Without a great team, it's very hard to make stuff happen out in the world. And I had a very, very small team for a very long time. And so that was a real challenge. But as the company grew and we had more resources to get more people on the bandwagon, I realized that feedback loop was just so crucial to growing and growing.
So it sounds like there's two parts to this. There's the external, right? Like sending surveys to the customer, getting those net promoter scores. How are we doing? But also looking internally and saying, hey, how can we be better from the inside out as well? And they're equally as important.
Yep. And, I'll give you a really honest example here. A few years ago, I think it was like 2.5 years ago, we were able to roll out 401ks to our team. And I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I hadn't asked anybody if that was actually what they wanted or needed or whatever. And it was kind of met with a little bit of meh. And I was so upset because I had, busted my butt to get this thing set up and they weren't exactly enthused about it. And it turns out there were a bunch of other things that were smaller that they would have liked to have resolved first, or, more time off, or more of this or more of that, right? And I assumed that it was 401ks and I didn't ask. And so that was a mistake on my end as part of the leadership, and I should have asked. And so it's moments like that where you kind of reflect back and think, should have checked in first.
That's good. Well, we work for Dave Ramsey, who's our CEO. So we love a good 401k around here because we're all about building wealth and being generous. And it's a great, so you did a great thing. I must say, if I worked at your company, I would be super pumped about the 401k. So you did a great thing there. While we're talking about feedback, it's interesting. You're saying get constant feedback, and feedback can be a hard pill to swallow. I mean, if you are the business owner, you just called my baby ugly. If you just, poked a hole in my product.
Yeah.
So is there a way to kind of create that culture of honesty, but of also respect and trust, and hey, I'm not here to punch anyone in the face with this. I just want a better product, and not making it a personal thing, but making it I want the best solution for the customer, and here's what that looks like. How do you do that well?
My head of product and my head of ops have differing opinions on things right now, right? Sometimes ops wants to set things up so that they're efficient, and they're only efficient. He's not thinking about design or style or color. He's really focused on efficiency. And my head of product is like, well, customers love this, so you better figure out a way to make it happen. And there's sometimes a rub there, right? And the way that we get through that, honestly, is whiteboard sessions. And the reason I love a good whiteboard session is it gets everybody out of their head, out of an email, and in a room where you can look people in the white of the eye and hear them, but like really hear them. And when you write things on a board, you're having to put your thoughts out on paper. And sometimes your thought is different than the way you're communicating it. But when you write it out, you're like, okay, cool. He's talking about a green tree. And then she writes something on the board and she's like, it's an orange tree. And then you suddenly realize you guys are talking about two different types of trees, even though you thought the entire time you were talking about the one purple tree. But turns out everyone's bringing a different colored tree to the table. And I've seen that a lot. And so whiteboarding it all out just clarifies the confusion and gets you to the bottom of it. And most of the time, disagreements are based on lack of communication or confusing communication, and you just got to talk it out. So that team has done a lot of talking through a lot of things to get in alignment and then move forward.